I can tell you there's enormous denial still in this town by the right and the left, who seem to think nothing happened in the last 5 years. Hey, something huge happened. We narrowly averted a depression. As a result, our deficit and debt exploded. We are in real danger of a financial debacle. And we can either face up to it and take it on now and have gradual change, or we can wait for the roof to cave in.
No Silver Bullet was the title of a Pew report. It actually is one of my favorite titles because it is an apt description of the tough choices that policymakers are facing when it comes to fixing the federal debt problem. There really is no silver bullet out there that is going to allow this country to fix its long-term debt problem.
What I want to talk about is comparing the depression of the 30s to the current situation. And I'm stealing a title from Paul Krugman, and more generally people have been referring to as the Great Recession. He's lately started referring to as a lesser depression, which I'll go on probably, unfortunately, might actually be the better term. The distinction being that recession we think of as being relatively limited in duration, and for better or worse, it looks like this will not be limited in duration. Okay, the peak unemployment rate in the Great Depression was 25% in 1933. Now, we could look at the actual unemployment rate now, 9.1%, and say, okay, that's not a comprehensive measure of unemployment. We have a lot of people that are working part-time with like full-time jobs. There's somewhere around 9 million in that category. We have people given up looking for work altogether. People have dropped out of the labor force, not because they feel that they don't want to work. It's just that if you've been looking for work for a year, 2 years, and you don't find a job, people drop out of the labor force. So in total, if we take a broader measure, somewhere around 16.5% of the workforce can be seen as in some way working less than they want.
In 2037, Social Security will be insolvent, will be unable to meet its full obligations. At that point, the law requires that there will be an across-the-board cut. Right now, that is estimated to be 22%.
We spend twice as much on health care in this country as any other developed nation, whether you talk about it as a percent of GDP or on a per capita basis.
The vast majority of the difference between us and everybody else are the sheer paperwork costs for insurance companies, healthcare providers, employers, and employees. China owns about 25% of our debt held by foreigners. They own 1.2 trillion. Japan's got about 900 billion. And there are problems with that.
At some point, people are going to look at our country and say, well, you're sort of like Greece. We don't want to buy your debt any longer. Or if we're going to buy your debt, we're going to make you pay so much for it that we're basically going to bankrupt you as a country.
The United Kingdom is the only country with a lot of our treasury notes that we have what you might call a normal economic relationship with.
Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the national debt is the #1 national security threat. Why would he say that? He's a military man. He is saying it because he understands the dependence of the United States on foreign lenders. Half of our debt now is being financed abroad. That puts the United States in a more vulnerable position.
That's doubly bad for America. It's bad for a couple of reasons. First of all, that's $1 trillion we can't invest in this country, in education or in infrastructure or in research to create the next new thing. But it's also $1 trillion that is going to be invested in Asia to educate their kids, to build their infrastructure, to create the next new thing over there so the jobs of the future are there, not here. That's nuts.
We didn't hide the numbers. Matter of fact, we drown ourselves in the numbers. This is the largest enterprise in the world. We've got 300,000 vehicles. We've got 300 installations. We run the largest school system in the world. largest daycare program in the world. 350,000 kids are in daycare every day. We run the 7th largest grocery chain in the world.
It's fair to say that we have overestimated the pace of growth, total output growth, GDP growth, from the beginning of the recovery.
I believe that our housing system should operate where there's a limited government role, and private lending should be the backbone of the housing market. And that includes, by the way...
Really? Well, how do you explain the $85 billion per month the Federal Reserve is buying to prop up the housing market? Not once in his entire speech did he mention the Federal Reserve. How can we talk about housing without addressing the biggest player in the market? President Obama did mention everyone drank the easy money juice the Fed poured. He just didn't say it was the Fed who poured it. The president said too many people took out mortgages who couldn't afford them, and the banks bought and sold mortgages they knew weren't sound. But he didn't talk about the Fed keeping interest rates artificially low, making all of this possible. As I outlined yesterday, through quantitative easing, the Fed has pumped over $2 trillion into the biggest banks. A lot of this money is sitting in their reserves.
We're spending approximately, as a country, $850 billion a year on healthcare that we would not spend if we had any other country's health system.
Healthcare is at the core of our long-term fiscal challenge between now and, say, 2050. Almost all of the projected growth in the federal budget is expected to come.
At some point here, if we stay on this course, we will find out what the effect is when the world loses confidence in the American currency, and it will be cataclysmic.
I pray you'll be eyes and watch us where we go and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer. When we lose our way, lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we